Okay, when you see the countdown, say on the air, you're on the air, okay?
Sure. Great. Thanks. Welcome to Talking Peace with the Western New York Peace Center, being produced here at Think Twice Radio in the home of the future, also the home of our friend and producer, Richard Wicca. Thanks, Richard. And we thank also our friends at WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative radio station, 91.3 FM. Thank you, Buff State. So when I think of thankfulness, I think of our dear Indigenous brothers and sisters, of how, in spite of their land being taken through trickery and violence, the near genocide or attempted genocide that they endured, they still start their every day, their every event and meet up is started with a ganonio, an appreciation where they have salutations and thanksgiving to the people who've made it all possible, as we just did, to Mother Earth for giving us everything we need in this creation for a good life here, and the hope and the prayer that Mother Earth will continue as originally instructed, so that life will continue in this creation. And then have the same salutations and thanksgiving to all the elements, and they go through all the elements, that is the living waters and all the different ways that we see the water, and that it is life itself for us, to the plants and to the animals of all kinds, to the brother sun, the grandmother moon, to the thunder beings, and to the star, the sky world, and to our Creator and the great mystery and the love that manifests it all, and that we should all act as we have been originally instructed, so that life will continue in this creation. And then they say Nyahweh, and the people say no. So Nyahweh.
No.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, it's a very important topic. Again, as always, there are so many of them. This is vital, and it's very local and very vital and very much running out of time to say we need to pay attention to what's going on about Humboldt Parkway. So we have here with us, very excited to have members of the Eastside Parkways Coalition. It's EastsideParkwaysCoalition.com. Thank you. That was what I wanted to be sure on. So, and we have Terrence Robinson, Matt Deering, and Marcia, or Marcy Robinson, all here, and all very involved in this very important effort. So welcome.
Thank you.
Terry. Thank you for coming.
It's good to share with you.
Oh, we're so glad. And Matt?
Very, very happy to be here. Thanks so much for having us on tonight.
Oh, we're so glad. And you've been doing a lot of work trying to get the message out, so we just want to help keep getting it out. And Marcia?
And I'm grateful to be here.
Oh,
Thank you for having us.
We're grateful. We're grateful to all three of you for all the work you've done. And I want to say I've been hearing about this for a while, but before we start to dive into the topic, as we said, we like to think of what are the values we need to think of in this issue or for this issue. So if we just go around, around the circle, and each one of you can just share a value or a couple values that you think of in this connection. So, Terry?
There are so many deep values involved in this whole process. But I think, as you started off with, I think sharing is kind of the fundamental thing. When we share and we think about how this impacts our brothers, our sisters, 7 generations forward, it's vital. And I'm thinking of this thing not only in the context of the past. There's so much heavy stuff there, but what is the effect of this decision on those next 7 generations and all of the people associated with it? That's my primary concern.
Thank you. Thank you. That's beautiful. Sharing and really sharing and looking forward to the 7 generations, which actually, of course, as you know, that's what the indigenous people do. You know, that's their benchmark, their, way of deciding. And Matt?
I think Terry said it very well. I think that's what what motivates me as a younger person involved with the coalition is like looking toward the end of my life and wondering what's going to be there, what am I going to leave for my children and grandchildren. But it's also about justice, environmental justice, racial justice, justice for a specific community, for a city, and it's about stopping the sort of history of short-sighted decision-making that I think has gone on for far too long in Western New York. Back to what Terry said, this is just about making sure that the legacy that we leave for the next generation is the best one that we can.
I just want to say you could say that again.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Every different part of that. So, yes, thank you so much, Matt. And Marcia?
And I agree with what has been said so far. And, I worked as an environmental engineer for 33 years, just
Really?
about. And so my priority has always been the protection of the public health and welfare and the environment. So that's a
Right.
big deal for me. And this project is totally against all of that. And environmental justice and, just changing the way things have been done, ramming this down our throats, whether we like it or not. It's not right.
Right.
And not lessening the burden on the people who have been harmed for decades.
Right. Thank you so much. So that, absolutely, and that's where you play a very key role with the background that you have, and back to looking forward and also looking back. I want to say, to me, I often, and very often, the values that I have to bring out are truth and love. Because I feel like, well, first of all, there was Dr. King said, we were just talking about this. Dr. King said, unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. So we need the truth. It's not, it's not excuses or partial truth or anything like that. And really the love of caring. And actually, I think of Cornel West said, justice is what love looks like in public. So the justice issues, which looking backwards, looking forwards, they're critical in this connection and to the way things are done or should be done. They should be critical to the way things are done. I'm not sure that they are. So that's why we're here, and that's why we're talking about it. So maybe just to lay it out, if I'm gonna say I remember, way back when this was very early, when it was percolating that there were problems with this plan. So do you want to each of you sort of lay out, if anything, you want to just sort of, how did we get to where we are and where are we now? So,
just a little perspective.
Okay, please.
Because my relationship with the Parkway goes back all my 7 decades. So when the Parkway was, when the original Parkway was there, we played on it. We played touch football. I walked to church along the Parkway in the early morning. And so in the time since, and watching the effect of the removal of the Parkway, and people talk about how the community has not responded or how the community is at odds with the different programs, etc. But that Parkway and the gash that it made in the community it continues to disconnect the people continues to disconnect the thoughts, continues to not allow people to come together and share ideas and visions of the future, visions of the past, all of those things in a way. So it has been a process that was designed to divide people in the discussion of it, divide people in the way they look at things, divide people so that by the time the project occurred, there would be no opposition, or the opposition would be so diffuse and engineered to attack each other that we're at this pass now. And we could not know what the project was going to be until they said, this is what we're looking to do. Even now, when they say this is what we're looking to do, there's all kinds of, well, maybe, but we might do this. It's shift changing constantly, so that by the time the actual plan was presented, it's only a matter of actually a few weeks, a few months.
Really?
And there's thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of documents to read to discern exactly what they're proposing. And even when they propose something like the tunnel, we're going to do the tunnel, we're going to cap it, but we're going to build it in such a way that if there's a problem, we can remove the cap. We're going to do it in such a way that it might be this long, it might be this wide. We have this contingency, we don't really know, and they're asking you to look at it and comment on it. So it's a thing that flew, so to speak, under the radar for so long. But I mean, I think there's always been at least in my heart, an intent to remove the parkway, remove the expressway as it exists and to replace it with the parkway that was there, that was designed to facilitate the flow, the connectivity between people.
Oh, thanks so much, Terry.
Yeah,
Matt, what would you say?
I agree. I think, I remember first seeing a Restore the Parkway sign, I don't know, it had to be 10 or 15 years ago, just a sign on a lawn. And I think that was kind of what spurred me to learning about it as a young person and its history and its significance to not just urban planning, but something that made Buffalo, a city known around the world. Was this park system that was a hallmark, something that had never really been seen before. And so I got directly involved with the Eastside Parkways Coalition just after the public comment period opened, after the DOT hearing that they had at the Buffalo Science Museum in mid-September. But some people may know, some may not. I ran for common council in the city of Buffalo earlier this year.
Right.
And I made filling in the park, my desire, my belief that we should fill in the parkway, a pretty integral issue to my campaign. Now, I didn't win. Otherwise, I'd be using a different bully pulpit in order to argue for this change. But that being said, I believe the coalition was created sometime in like July or August, like very, 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 very recently. And I think it was a pretty small group of people until sort of the public meetings showed that there's a lot of discontent in the community, but more than anything, sort of to Terrence's point, that people, different pockets of people all believe the project is, that something different has been proposed and something different will come from the project in the future. I was out door knocking on Saturday collecting surveys, and I spoke to people who believe that the project will have filtration integrated. The DOT has said that the air currently meets the federal air quality standards and that the air afterward will meet the federal air quality standards, so there's no need to filter the air. Now, what all that tells me is that the federal air quality standard is probably too high. I met someone who believes that this would be a 2-deck tunnel. There's no indication from the DOT of that. I've spoken to people who believe that there's a future plan to put some sort of rapid transit or train under the tunnel. The DOT and Labella, the engineering company who's received the design and build contract, they've been, given this contract by the State Department of Transportation, they will tell you very clearly that that's not part of the project. And that's sort of what drew me to getting involved back on the ground on this issue, because it's clear if people don't know what's going on, somebody's got to try to cut through the 900-page reports and the fancy, talking points and things like that, or statements from the DOT officials or from the folks at the higher up folks at LaBella. And I want to make a statement that there are folks at LaBella who are doing work in the community, and we have a lot of respect for them. They're taking the slings and arrows from folks who are always asking them questions. It's the folks who are higher up, I think, that we have an issue with. But I think the core piece, before we move on to Marcia, is the core piece is that there's $1 billion in funding from the state from the DOT, from the State Transportation Capital Fund, that's been designated by Governor Hochul to be spent on the Kensington project. There are elected officials, people with the trust of the people in vaunted positions with the trust of the community, who are going out on radio programs, podcasts, and telling newscasters that the money will automatically go away if community opposition to this project is voiced and we ask for a different solution. Reporters, independent reporters, Nate Benson from WGRZ, reported in mid-November that, and I don't have the exact quote from the news story, but it's on our Facebook page, that the money ultimately is state money plus $55 million in a federal grant that was given to this project. So $55 million of $1.2 billion. If you take even if the federal monies were to go away, that leaves you with $1.145 billion. The governor, at her discretion, can choose either to keep the project here in Western New York for the Kensington and place it into the DOT's state's TIP account, same as was done with the money for the 198 Skajakwata project, and can hand the authority of that project over to the Greater Buffalo Niagara Regional Transit Council, as was done with the Skajakwata project. And so ultimately, with the money piece, which is being used really to divide the community and frankly to scare people out of voicing their concerns,
Right.
it's fundamentally not true. And I think there's a reason why when you ask the DOT directly, they won't give you a straight answer on it. If you ask LaBella directly, they won't give you a straight answer on it. But elected officials who, last I checked, can't really be held liable for statements that they make in the press are the ones going out and saying that this money is automatically going to disappear or go downstate. Or, as one elected official said, well, just let it go away if the people don't want it. Now, last I checked, I don't consider that to be advocacy for your community.
Right.
If people are voicing opposition and then you're saying, well, if they don't like this, let it go downstate. It can't. The highway's got to be fixed anyway. And I think it would be a massive political liability after coming here in the wake of the 514 shooting and saying that we're spending this money here largely because finally this horrific event brought a state, a nation, a world's attention onto the east side of Buffalo, that now we're going to finally try to right this historic wrong. I don't think, frankly, the black voters across the state of New York, if she were to take this money out of this community, I have a feeling that black voters across the state of New York would have a problem with that. And she can't get reelected in a few years without that support. So ultimately, there's no way that the money's going to disappear. And that, I think, is really the keystone to the whole point of why we're speaking out and speaking up and trying to change the scope of what they're trying to do here.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for all that. And Marcia?
Well, I first got involved with EastsideParkwaysCoalition after I started to read the report. I live on Humboldt Pkwy and for a very long time, and I worked as an environmental engineer for years. So I was looking at it as a homeowner and an engineer. And when I was looking at it, astounded at some of the things that they were going to do, like using explosives very near our homes to remove bedrock. I mean, within like 30, 40 feet of our houses. And that they, you know, when they do that, they release toxic gases from the bedrock, including radon, and all of the vibrations, not just from the blasting, but all the pounding and jackhammering and everything that they're going to do for 4 to 5 years during the construction period was right next to our houses. And our homes are like 120 years old. They're fragile. They're historic, and you know, releasing toxic gases, cracking our foundations, our walls, our roofs, you know, our sewer lines, you know, water lines, is dangerous. And you know, if radon gas has no odor, you can't see it, so we would never know it's there. And when I went back and I looked at a concept study that the DOT did in 2012, they mentioned that as an issue, that they need to monitor the basements of our homes during this period. And the other thing was they have 250,000 square feet of concrete in the bridges and the retaining walls that have a asbestos-containing material on the back that they say is non-friable, but after all these years of deterioration, I don't think it's non-friable. I think it's friable, and I think it will be released when they're sawing it and breaking it up, crushing it to remove it, and that will be released into the air and could affect the health of the people that live along that parkway. And the other thing was that they're looking at two scenarios that are exactly the same, except they're concentrating all the pollutants and pushing it out the end of the tunnels, you know, each end, and that's increasing the concentration of all pollutants. They only looked at CO and PM10 and PM2.5, but there's a lot of pollutants. There's all kinds of mobile source air toxics and things like that, and they didn't look at those. And you know, so like Matt said, the DOT is saying that, you know, they're in compliance with the standards, so our air is clean and we're good. But we know that people all along Humboldt Parkway are getting sick with diseases that are caused by vehicle exhaust, like asthma, all kinds of respiratory illnesses like COPD, leukemia, lung cancer, heart attacks, heart disease, learning disorders, dementia. I mean, there's so many things, low life expectancy and low birth weight babies and premature birth, things like that. And you know, what is causing this? I mean, they've never once measured anything in our air. So, you know, what we really need is an air quality study and an environmental health risk assessment, which looks at the cumulative effects, like the layer upon layer upon layer of contaminants that's making us sick. And, you know, that's not even a thought. You know, they've been working on this for 15 years or so, and they've never once thought to do something like that. I just have a lot of issues, and then Matt and I have been talking about the whole park system, which is basically a intensive green roof. So they're telling us that they're going to have a park. They have a replica of Olmsted Park on top of the tunnel that's supposed to suffice.
It's
as
a poor facsimile.
Right, exactly. And in 3 feet of soil, and then they have a 6-inch drainage section that is going to deteriorate over time. The roots of the trees will penetrate that and possibly the structure itself. And it's going to have to be removed at some point. And that means all of the trees go, the soil, and they're going to have to redo the whole thing and possibly replace the cap of the tunnel. They don't talk about that, you know, out in the open, but it's it's parts of it are insinuated in the report. So I mean, if you add 1 and 1 together, you get 2. And
Oh yeah, and these
Right.
these reports aren't, these are reports written by an engineering and design company. They're not easy to read and like understand. They don't tell you what building
No, of
material.
course.
They tell you
Yeah.
vaguely what sort of building material that they're going to use, but they don't tell you specifics. They don't tell you whether the insulation is going to be from Dow Chemical or it's going to be from Owens Corning. But I've done a little bit of research, and I found some documentation from NYSERDA, which is the New York State Energy Research Development Agency, that outlines some of the types of insulation, for instance, that would be placed in the bottom of the cap. And so I brought some documentation just so folks can't say that I'm spreading dis or misinformation. I assuming that the cap requires high load styrofoam insulation, which is what NYSERDA instructs you to use in the construction of both green roofs and highway caps, and it's also recommended for use in states around the country. I was reading just last night about a highway cap project in Dallas, Texas, that they're doing that has the same sort of exact stack of materials used in it. So for Dow styrofoam 1 by 24-inch butt edge high load 60 extruded foam insulation. The important part, it's styrofoam, so touching it's not going to kill you. It's flammable, so be careful if you're a firefighter. But I think the most interesting point is in point 7. And again, this is from Dow. I found it on like the Masons Union website, actually. And it has conditions for safe storage and its shelf life. Now, I think shelf life by most corporations is measured in ideal conditions. The shelf life of this insulation is 360 months or 30 years. So there's kind of 2 options here.
Right.
Either after its actual usage life is up, the state digs up the park and replaces it, essentially re-traumatizing a community, making them watch the park be torn out again, or what's equally as likely is they let it fall into disrepair as they do all across the state.
right.
So that's
So-
just one piece. And then when it comes to the membranes, if you use the most expensive, which would be PVC, it'll last 60 years. The cheapest is like 10 to 15. So at some point, this is going to have to come up and be replanted, and those trees will never get to be anywhere near 50 feet tall.
So you did also show some, you were picking up
Yes.
different maps. So I'm not going to ask you about them now. I want to go back to Marcia for a minute. But I assume that those are on your website, too.
They are. Yeah,
and that
they're all on
people can see that.
EastsideParkwaysCoalition.com. We've got a
But-
documents page, and you can find all of the stuff that I've
Right.
shown so far there.
Right. And so what else were you going to say about the health
Well,
effects? Or was that...
another one of
Or
the
what
things
else
I
were
was
you
going
gonna
to
say?
say is
Yes.
that people don't realize that the tunnel is going to be larger than the expressway is now, so it's encroaching on our homes.
Mm-hmm.
And then beyond the tunnel is they'll have underground utility rooms that basically come up to the curb below ground. So all of that, I mean, it's just kind of bizarre that we would have a tunnel in our front yard, basically. And they talk about how the value of our homes are going to go up. But I don't know anybody that's going to want to buy a house with a tunnel in their next to their living room. It's
right. So
insane.
that you couldn't you can't dig into your own property. really,
It's right there, and all the vibrations, the
Sure.
stuff that happens in a tunnel, the accidents are going to be increased because tunnels
Right.
have an effect on you when you drive.
Right.
And you move away from the wall, or they just have a weird effect
Right.
on your driving. So I mean, we're going to have increased accidents, and on top of that, they have these jet fans in the middle of the tunnel, like across from our house, that I'm assuming that when there's a fire or there's some sort of congestion, they're going to be on reverse, pumping toxic air and smoke out of the tunnel into our neighborhood. So there's so many things that are bad about this. It's just an insane, absurd plan.
It just boggles the mind as I'm listening. So I want to say, so we've been talking about the environmental and health effects primarily. I just want to say, in full disclosure, that you two are married and
Yes.
have your and live right on Humboldt
Yes.
Parkway, or above the 33, I guess I
Right,
could
right.
call
Yeah,
it.
we can. It's
Right.
in our right across
It's,
across the way.
it's at the verge of your front yard.
Yes.
Yeah. So, so the other thing, another thing, not that we've left off, and I know there, Matt, all those things that, are showing what are the health effects currently, which haven't been fully explored, nor have the repercussions that would come from this. And they keep saying, it reminds me of, in a way, of nuclear waste, and the way they keep, using nuclear plants and like nuclear waste. Oh, it's no real problem, except that it is a huge problem. Nothing clean about it, but they haven't figured it out yet, but they keep kicking it down the road. And then meanwhile, the community is left with Roswell Park because of all the cancer, all the nuclear waste that we have around. So it's that same just blocking off and ignoring or pretending away the things that are inconvenient. But what I want to go to, if we could just do another go round about the community involvement piece. So I heard some dates, and they sounded. It almost seems to me, now tell me if I'm wrong, that I remember hearing somebody, we were talking about this right before we started this show, that one community activist was at a show and tell meeting with all the pictures and the nice, fancy diagrams and things, and maybe a mock-up or something. And, she was like, well, there was no community people here. And I'm thinking that was like, I want to say somewhere last winter, something like last winter.
Right.
So if we could go around with like, how much has the community heard about this, and how has the community been involved or not involved? So if you could each address that, and sort of the timing of some of these things.
Again, the structure itself, the effect of it has been to divide and prevent community cohesion. And this plan illustrates it brilliantly, if you will, because, as you know, I'm a historian, I'm a
Right.
preservationist.
Right.
And when I look at preservation, is not about putting something and holding it as it was whatever many years ago. Preservation's about learning the lessons from the past to inform how we move forward in the future. So you learn and you practice the best things that you've learned, and you learn from your mistakes, and you learn how to do things better. In this case, Buffalo is such a unique place in the history of the country. Even though we go back into the Jim Crow era, et cetera, when railroad was king, Buffalo was the second largest railroad center in the country. That meant the International Brotherhood of Porters was the critical, Randolph Hearst,
Right.
in terms of integrating the military in the middle of World War II. You go back, the associations that go with at the end of the Scajaquada Creek, when the Niagara movement in the 1900s
Right.
crossed over into Canada and later became the NAACP. Well, the NAACP, the founding members of that, two of the sisters were Jewish. And that community at the time of the struggle between the working class people and the people just coming to the country, that continued for another 50 years until the Faith Missionary Baptist Church purchased what was a shul, a synagogue that was
Right.
built in the 20s from that Jewish community, and they passed it on to the burgeoning African American community at that time. And that community, that congregation remains today, over 50 years ago at Faith Missionary. Well, the young Dr. Martin Luther King spoke at Faith Missionary Baptist Church in the late 50s, before Selma, before all of these ties that exist that can only exist in Buffalo. W.E.B. Du Bois was at the Pan American Exposition, and those sisters, Peggy Bertram, Barbara Nevergoat Seals, were just given a award for their recognition of W.E.B. Du Bois and his role at the time in 1901. All of these things come together in different ways. Shirley Chisholm, Adam Clayton Powell, giants of the last half of the 20th century, spoke at Humboldt Missionary Baptist Church, because Humboldt Missionary Baptist Church was where the congregation from the Michigan Street Baptist Church moved in 1962. So you've got that history. You've got the history of the Jewish community that when they were displaced, actually, when they built the
Temple Beth Zion?
the Route 33,
Route
what
33,
they did,
right.
what they did was ethnic cleansing, and they moved out a whole population, and that is when black folks came up and they did the war industry. $5 billion worth of money was spent on the war industry in Buffalo. So the labor force largely came from the South in the Great Migration. But when those folks came and bought those houses in Cold Springs and the Fruit Belt, they were often earning more money than the people they displaced, because they were working in the heavy industry. So there's a lot of mythology that is displaced or misplaced or misrepresented that doesn't capture the actual lived experience of the time. Humboldt Parkway captures the German-American von Humboldt. It captures the Jewish transitional that later went on to form the foundation of Amherst. And it captured an enormous second half of the 20th century African-American history. Beverly Johnson, the first on Vogue, Bob Lanier playing at Maston Boys Club, Herbert Bellamy the first, and Lydia Wright, and Dr. Evans, and the ophthalmologist of world renown, Dr. Yerby Jones, a whole segment of people. When you remove the history of our elders, when you remove the context of where we live, you are destroying our prospect, not only for who we are and the recognition of our past, but who we will be in the future. This is the lived reality that accompanies the environmental disaster, the economic disaster. When you look at the variety of stores and shops and caretakers and solo practitioners that used to live there, it mirrors what is Elmwood Village today, which for 30 years has been classified one of the top 10 neighborhoods in the country. So the restoration of the Humboldt Parkway is a restoration of a community. When you go through there and you look at every corner, they're vacant. The mixed-use store, the mixed-use storefront, the mixed-use doctor, lawyer, baker, that you could used to go every 4 or 5 blocks. That's what makes strong, vital neighborhoods when your first job is sweeping out the neighborhood store. That has been absolutely decimated. And that's what we're talking about with the restoration of the 33.
Right. Thank you, Terrence.
That was a great history, Terry.
Yeah. There's a lot.
There's-
So
there-
there's
I
even
believe
more.
it. So much
There's so
more.
much more. Of course, there is. So Matt,
So what I would speak on is the way that sort of this project, and again, Terry probably knows it probably better than almost
we
anybody
share,
else.
bro. We share.
So there's a group called Restore Our Community Coalition, has been around for quite some time, has been advocating for a reconnection of these neighborhoods for, I think, officially 15 years, but really the core of it, I think that many of those people have been pushing for this for quite some time. And so we, with the Eastside Parkways Coalition, we have an immense amount of respect for Stephanie Barber Jeter and the work that the people in Rock have done to get us this far. But what we're advocating for is that in the wake of 514, when the governor came here and said, frankly, that, well, this community finally deserves some money. They finally deserve something. To
Right.
say that the cap is not enough, right? It does, and it leaves out the fruit belt. It leaves out neighborhoods that are north of Ferry Street, if anything, in some ways. And again, not to cast aspersions on the motivations of the people who are doing this, but it quite literally targets them there at the end of the tunnel. And all of these increased rates of both particulate matter, carbon monoxide, and
Right.
other pollutants.
Right.
It does nothing for the other black neighborhoods that extend further east through the 33 corridor, out past Bailey, even into northwest Cheektowaga, which is currently and still is a black neighborhood, right?
Right.
So if we're talking about reconnecting the east side, if we're talking about reconnecting Buffalo, if we're talking about ending a history of racial segregation, urban renewal, hostile urban design like the 33,
Yes.
redlining, we've got to have a comprehensive plan for this. And at Eastside Parkways Coalition, we think the only way to truly have a comprehensive and fully restorative process is to fill in both this portion and then working forward the rest of, and eventually get rid of this entire highway that's destroyed a community, as Terry said, destroyed a vibrant commercial district. We've got data that shows that the city streets themselves, the radial streets that run east to west in what is probably the best designed city in the United States of
Right,
America,
right,
can
right.
handle an increase in traffic. And we even know that because, as I said at the beginning, buried at the very bottom of my stack of papers, the State Transit Capital Fund, we're not Oregon. You can use DOT funds for any sort of transportation project, whether it's highways, roads, airports, or train stations. So in the future, what we think we could do with this money alone is to then invest in green public transit that it eventually gets cars off the road at all. Because for as
Right.
much as the DOT...
Oh, hallelujah.
As much as the DOT likes to talk about, oh, well, emissions will go down when people start to buy electric cars, that would be true whether they're driving through the trench that exists now or whether they're driving on city streets. But switching to electric cars does nothing about the particulate matter that comes off of as brake dust, as tire dust, and other things. If anything, electric cars, which are generally speaking on average heavier than cars with internal combustion engines, the tires are going to wear faster and the brakes are going to wear faster because it's heavier on the tires, which means more friction, which means more degradation, and it takes more energy to stop them, which means the brakes are going to degrade faster.
Right.
So these sorts of things, when they talk about, oh, EVs are coming in and that'll deal with the pollution, at least from what we've seen, and we'd love someone from the DOT to refute this, someone from the DOT or from Labella to refute this, those considerations have not been made, and fundamentally, again, the work Rock's done is very, very valuable. Again, we probably wouldn't have this $1 billion if they hadn't been advocating for so
Right.
long.
Right.
But the community is, people will and have, and I'm sure will continue to accuse myself and other members of the group. They will lob rather scurrilous accusations at us. But people who know us know that we're engaged in this in good faith, and our motivations are plain
Absolutely.
and clear and are out. I wear a compass on my neck every time I leave my house. I never wore jewelry until a couple years ago after I lost my job for standing up for what was right. And the compass is here to remind me that if I'm doing something, it's because I'm moving in the right direction. So anybody who tries to impugn our motivations, I think, reveals the fact that they can't exactly challenge the arguments that we're making here today,
Right.
have made in many public meetings, and
Yes.
will be continuing to make. So for anyone who says I'm insulting the intelligence of people in the community, I'm collecting statements that I've heard and repeating them as I always try to do. There are people saying that this is phase one of a multi-phase project. Labella and the DOT will not agree with that. They will say, oh, this project does not preclude a future project, but that's rather wishy-washy speak. We know that the bed of the Skagway Creek, which sits in what some folks call the bathtub at the interchange between the 33 and the 198, already has a subway running underneath it there's absolutely no room to continue this tunnel further underneath it. This, for as much as I think we deserve as much money as New York City does not think we deserve as much money as New York City, and that they're not going to build the Lincoln or Holland Tunnel under the Skajackwada Creek bed. So fundamentally, it seems largely impossible that this would be phase one of a multi-phase project. Again, if the DOT or Labella would like to go on the record with that statement, well, then that would be something for us to consider. The state's also projected to be in a rather massive budget deficit in the next 5 or 6 years, so I don't know where any money for a future phase project would come from. Again, like I said, I've heard people say this is going to be a 2-layer tunnel, that there's going to be a train running through it, sort of all these things. It's clear, and I've heard through the grapevine a bit, that there was supposed to be extra money. And again, like Labella has a community representative who's out and again is talking to people in the community. I don't mean to disparage or demean her at all. We've had good conversations. I actually just spoke with her. I ran into her just a couple days ago. But I believe there was supposed to be more money from, I think, the Obama administration that got tied up that was supposed to go for more community outreach. And what I've, again, heard through the grapevine, as many people are about this project, right, which should sort of be a hallmark of what's going on here, is that money didn't go through. But, I mean, I talked to people on Saturday who think the air is going to be filtered. They don't know that it's not going to be, and yet they've sent a statement in support of the project. The comments to the DOT were released today. You can read them on the DOT's website. We're waiting on them to tally them up and say what's pro, what's con, and what's neutral. Again, motivated reasoning. They're going to find anything in a comment that they can say is pro the project. But if you read those comments that even say they're supportive, they are saying things in those letters that the DOT and Labella have not said. They believe people fundamentally, even people who are involved and rather close to the ground on this, they believe things about this project that no one in an official capacity has agreed to. And again, if there's any evidence of that, we'll take that all into consideration. But it's just not there right now.
Right. Well, thanks, Matt. And Marcia.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize about the redistribution of traffic, that, most of the radials and side streets can handle the traffic redistributed. We're not going to have 75,000 cars, and the 75,000 cars is 2 ways. So that's like 37,500 cars a day. And those cars, I mean, if a person normally gets on the 33 from like Genesee Street and they drive up to get on it, they're going to take Genesee Street straight in. They're not going to go that way then to ride on Humboldt Parkway. This is if it's restored.
Right.
And most, when you look at the volume to capacity ratios for the city, most of the congestion is where people are getting on the highways. I mean, it's not on the streets.
Right.
So if people got
Right.
off this highways, started driving the streets, which I've been doing lately, and I'm finding out it's pretty nice, and sometimes quicker, it's a good thing. And it's not. We're not going to have 75,000 people driving past our house. That is a lie. It's a lie.
It is. It's fundamentally untrue.
And the other thing that they're going to do is they're closing the ramps at Utica on and off. So they're actually walling the community off from the expressway. We can't even use it. We have to drive all the way down to Best Street to get on it.
Right.
I'm not going to get on it. I'm going to take the side streets.
Right.
Then because of that, the traffic on southbound Humboldt is going to increase like 4,000 cars a day, estimated. So how is that going to reduce our air pollution? It's ridiculous.
Well, and I think one of the things I'm hearing from everything that you're all saying is the short-sightedness of this plan because of the problems. First of all, the weight of this plan that will fall on the surrounding community that supposedly is supposed to be helped by this plan.
Right.
Instead, they'll be hurt by this plan because of the increased pollution and all the upheaval and everything else.
There will be, and again, like before we get accused of sowing discontent or misinformation, there will be pretty much equivalent. So homes directly along the cap would see a relatively small improvement in air quality. But at the ends of this, the neighborhoods that don't get the cap, you don't get a park in front of your house, and you get all the pollution from inside of the tunnel. And again, the air quality standards, they're saying it's already fine. So the idea that a small improvement is what $1 billion, not is it worth $1 billion, this community is worth $10 billion, the entire budget of the United States government, in my opinion. But we should be able to get more for $1 billion than a modest improvement along a small stretch of a highway.
And
Go ahead.
And they're also contradicting all the laws that they've passed for climate change.
Right.
You know, and they're supposed to be reducing vehicular traffic and air pollution, especially in a disadvantaged community like we are.
So-
right. You know, I mean, not right now, but during June of 2022 to June of 2023, the DEC drove around in had a
Right.
contractor driving around in cars,
Right.
measuring the air street by street,
Right.
20 passes a year, and our air is pretty bad.
Right.
You know, and
Right.
so we know that.
This
Right.
is an
And-
environmental issue. It is a justice issue. It is a traffic issue.
It is a health issue.
It is a health issue.
Mm-hmm.
It is not a black, red, white, brown, right, left issue.
Right.
Let me just say, when I look at the layers of this thing, my mother was one of the first Buffalo police officers, female, 1960. And when she came on, the Buffalo police commissioner was Frank Felicetta. Lived in a house at Northland and Humboldt Parkway. Paid $20,000 to move his house back right then. He lived next door to St. Francis de Sales Church. The person that designed St. Francis de Sales Church was George Dito. He lived across the street on Humboldt. He was the same person that he was the architect of Buffalo City Hall. So his house does not count in the historic resources.
Right.
Neither does St. Francis de Sales, neither does Skajackwada Creek. They engineered this whole report.
Yes.
It's a fraud.
I want,
fraud,
to, you know, the other thing, the word Olmsted, you know, and the parks and the slowing down and the green
Central Park.
as you said, Matt, you were saying that this is less expensive to do the thing that will not require another generation of tearing
right.
the neighborhood apart in 30 years or however many years it may be. Instead, to fill it in, then that restores the vision and
Right.
it leaves all this money for a better transportation.
For a better transportation system, for improved radial streets
Right,
that will then drive
right,
traffic in
yes.
front of abandoned and empty businesses and vacant lots where
Right.
there used to be vibrant black businesses. And your point about Olmsted is close to me for two reasons. So obviously, growing up as a kid in Buffalo, you hear about Olmsted all the time. Obviously, it's on all the signs. My father's family is from Louisville, Kentucky. My grandfather was the president of the Louisville and then the Kentucky NAACP in the late 1950s and the early 1960s. Actually, I was at a conference of black state legislators a few weeks ago. I met someone who knew my grandfather when he
That's
was 15
exciting.
years old in Louisville.
Wow.
It was a real sort of closing of a circle for
Sure.
me. Louisville is another city with an Olmsted designed park and parkway system that was very much like Buffalo's, destroyed. So this is an issue that, to me, I may be 30, but the truth is that, you know, it's something that has affected my family.
Right.
You know, I heard someone say, "Oh, the Parkway wasn't stolen from Matt Deering; it was stolen from the people who lived there before," and that is true. But there was an Olmsted Parkway that was stolen from my family at 3418
Right.
Grand Avenue in Louisville,
Right.
Kentucky, in Jefferson County, and what we don't want to do is steal this parkway for the next generation and the one after and the one after that.
Right. So I want to say we're almost out of time. And if you see that we are almost out of
Yeah, I
time.
see that.
So I think we need to really cut to very quickly how people can get involved. So I know you're having a meeting on Thursday, the
December 20. Well,
So
there,
No, so let's not go backwards. Just the ones that, I mean, there's one tomorrow
Tomorrow
that
night.
is Thursday, the
yes.
14th.
Yes, if you're watching on the live stream tomorrow, Thursday, December 14th, there will be a meeting at the Delvin Grider Center. We say it starts at 5:30. Get there by 5:45, and you'll be all right.
And?
And then
Friday.
we're having an info session that I believe is from 4 to 6 p.m.
The 15th.
On the 15th, also
Right.
at the Delvin Grider Center. It's a presentation of more research by the students of Professor Brad Wales at UB, the Small Built Works program, who's been making a lot of these great graphs and things with publicly available data. The data
Right.
didn't come from the
Yep.
middle of nowhere. And then next Thursday, the 21st,
The
there will be a meeting
21st.
that's being hosted by We Are Women Warriors, which is a group that is,
People-
Betty Jean. Yeah, Betty
People
Jean.
are at this show are very familiar with Betty Jean Grant.
And Betty Jean
Yeah.
Grant, one of my idols, really, will be hosting this event at the Meriwether Library at 5:30 next Thursday, the 21st of December. So if you're
21st.
listening on the radio, that'll be your first opportunity to show up in person and get involved. And then you can always go to EastsideParkwaysCoalition.com, where we've got all of our resources and research that's publicly available. We've got color-coded maps that are a little
Right.
bit easier to understand than what the DOT's put out. And there's also instructions there on how to submit your thoughts and comments to the Department of Transportation. While it's true that the official public comment period ended and as a show of quote-unquote goodwill was extended for an extra 2 weeks, what they're doing is, like many things in this project, merely meeting their minimum legal obligation. Now, you can still contact the DOT. So if you go to kensington.dot.ny.gov, you can, if you go to our website, you can find all the links, and there's still
Right.
an email address that you can email thoughts and comments to that they say will be considered.
So that is the website to go to, EastsideParkwaysCoalition.com.
You got it, Vicki.
.com. So that is actually on the write-up for this show. So anywhere you see this show or hear this show, you should be able to find it, which includes the Western New York Peace Center channel, YouTube channel. Will have this on it. So meanwhile, I want to say it's been just wonderful having you all on. I can't thank you enough. We can't thank you enough at the Western New York Peace Center for bringing this up. It's such a huge issue. It affects us all so much, and it's urgent because
It's
this
urgent.
is the time is the clock is ticking, and there's this way that inertia keeps things going the way they're going, and so people who've decided they want this to happen are gonna do it unless the community rises up
And
quickly enough and loudly enough. And you all each one of you have done so much towards that. I want to say out of the goodness of your heart, out of the courage and integrity that you all have, that's just caring about the community and seeing the obvious, things.
my sister, the struggle continues.
Yes, so
Yeah.
we're so grateful. I can't thank you enough. We'll keep working together, and this has been Talking Peace, and together we've been talking peace in truth and love. So